The community agrees to back the farmers, so they join in a common effort, which is, growing food, taking good care of land, all that sort of thing. And from that point, there can be, who knows how many different models of CSA, but it has to do with the fact of a local community supporting a farmer.
Hi, welcome back to the Farmcast. We're here at Amber Waves. I'm Katie.
And I'm Amanda, and here with us today is our mentor, poet-farmer Scott Chaskey. Formerly of Quail Hill Farm around the corner, but now, well, retired and writing and living your best life.
I graduated.
You graduated.
Exactly. So Scott farmed at Quail Hill for 30 years and taught us how to farm, and we're now in our 17th season of farming.
Amazing.
About 35 acres of mixed vegetables, grains, and cut flowers here in Amagansett on the east end of Long Island. Scott, thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
I couldn't be happier.
This is our joy. So the things that we're going to talk about today, we want to hear from you about CSA. But Amanda reminded me, she's like, let's back up for a second, because we're all seated at the table because we fell in love with plants and farming and working outside and listening to the rhythms of nature and being involved in the rhythms of nature. So before we start talking about CSA, can you please share your intro to working with plants and gardening and how that wove itself into literature and the self-work of Long Island?
Sure, I can do that. It's a wonderful question. So I grew up in the suburbs, not so unusual for many CSA farmers. I do remember as a child visiting upstate New York near Plattsburgh, where my father grew up, and his father, spent some time farming, and if you go to the generation before that, they all farmed, So I do remember experiencing that. However, Tonawanda, New York did not look anything like that. So really my entrance into, what led to farming was helping some friends rebuild a house on the Saco River in Maine. And they had come from Wisconsin. They found this, they were slightly older than me, and they were ready to buy their first house. They found a house with 3 acres of land, surrounded by 250 acres of woodland on the Saco River in Maine, really beautiful, and created a big garden. And that was my first gardening experience, probably, of that sort.
How old were you at the time?
I would have been mid-20s, like 25, something like that. And I helped them rebuild the house, and we cut wood for the wood stove and the heat and everything. So it was back to the land, right? But really, when I sort of got hooked was in England. I went to study through Antioch College, which had a Center for British Studies in London, but I chose to live in Oxford, and to pay for my £8 a week bedsit, I got a job as a gardener, and I got hooked with gardening. And then when I met Megan, in England, we came back here for a bit. Then we went back to Cornwall and spent 8 years in Cornwall, and that's where I really got hooked by working in the cliff meadows, which you've heard much about.
We never tire of hearing about
it.
I mean, even hearing you say cliff meadows, I'm already right there with you.
Yeah. Well, that was very different type of gardening. It was really, it was gardening, but what I really like about sort of finding my way in the back door of farming was that I did start with the focus on plants in a garden. Not if you remember, but I probably didn't say this right away when new apprentices would come, because there's so much to talk about, but after a while I would sort of look to see who was actually paying attention to the plants, because there's people sometimes getting into it are more excited by the tractors, or, you know, in the case of our CSA, where people were coming and going with, you know, communing with other folks. But actually focusing on plants and learning about plants is really the key. That's what it's about, really.
Yeah,
So,
well, I remember actually, now that you say that, Katie was able to pay such close attention to plants. I really had to learn it. I don't know if it comes more naturally to you. And we've talked about this before. Everywhere I go with Katie, she finds a fruit tree. She just is like looking up, and she finds food in nature in a way that I just kind of don't. But I remember
I'm reluctantly telling you we're sitting under a black walnut tree right now. We're gonna have to dodge these nuts.
But that, yeah, I think for you it seemed to me like, wow, that comes so naturally to her, and I had to learn to pay attention to the plants. But that.
Well, I remember you first saying, I mean, speaking of plants, early in that spring when we were learning to use hand tools, we were waking up the herb circle and the herb crescent.
Oh, yeah.
And your advice was turn it over rough.
Oh, I'm so happy you remember that.
We
Crystal
always
clear.
talk about that.
Crystal clear, and it was, it took a moment to understand what that physically means that we have to do.
Yeah.
But that you had said that was conveyed to you through one of your mentors as
Edgar.
well.
Yeah, Edgar Wallace, yeah. With a great Cornish manner of speaking like that. Turn him over rough.
Yeah, that's actually the voice that I think I was saying it in. Well, one of my early memories of being at Quail Hill was that, so the farm manager that year was Joe O'Grady. He actually was only there in the early part of the season, and then he went on sabbatical. That was the year that he went to go hike the Pacific
hiking.
Crest Trail.
Yeah.
And so he was there with us for the first few weeks of the season, and then was going to depart. And when we first got there, I think he probably already had one foot out the door on that season. And he said to me, I can't teach watering. It's like teaching dancing. I said, okay. But I don't know how to water anything. So it was, so I remember it was lunchtime one day, and Joe went out for lunch, had left for lunch, and I walked into the greenhouses, and the plants were wilting, and I hadn't been taught how to water.
Oh,
I mean, this
my
is
God.
how basic you start.
You
I was
can
like,
really
I didn't
start from
and I was
how
so
do you
afraid
water plants?
Yeah.
to ruin, I don't know what to ruin everything. So I didn't know, and Joe was gone, so I didn't know what to do. I ran up the hill and up the stairs into the shop office, and it said, Scott, the plants are wilting and Joe is at lunch. And you were on the phone, and you so gently pulled the phone away from your mouth and said, well, if the plants are wilting, then water them. And if anyone else asks, I'm on a conference call. Got it. Okay.
That's a great lesson for you right
actually,
there.
well,
What a teacher.
Plants need water.
And I'm on the phone. But it was anytime when I think back to that first apprentice season, and what it was like to be very, very new. And I have another distinct memory of us having to move the onion seedlings from one greenhouse to another, and there was a greenhouse that just had onion and eggplant seedlings. There were only variety names on the front of the sticks, not what crop it was. And of course, well, anyone who knows a plant knows that an allium looks so much different than a nightshade in a tray. But I remember not being able to tell the difference of which was which. Remembering how green we started and how kind and patient you always were with us has really informed the way that we train farmers now, of saying of people coming in really, really green.
Well, I'm glad to hear I was kind and patient, since I was such a great teacher, telling you go water. Of course.
Well, also,
what else could you do?
That's a good lesson of like, how badly could you mess it up? Just water them. But
I think we turned that eventually into something we say to our apprentices. Plants do want to live.
yeah, plants want to live.
They want to live.
Yeah, maybe not cucumbers.
And they do love water.
They do.
They really do.
Not too much.
Yeah.
Well, what has it? You're responsible for the growth or the birth of so many hundreds of farmers, of people who went through the apprenticeship program at Quail Hill and then who became teachers themselves. Actually, I remember once it was a huge group of us, of apprentices from Quail Hill and other farmers, and we were at someone's home, and a new person walked in the door, and instead of going around the circle to say who we were, I said, "We're Scott's kids." And Josh said, "Different mothers." And it was like the comedic timing of that. It was, man, it landed. But knowing that you have so many kids around, around the country and around the world farming that are of you, what does it feel like
it's wonderful.
to know that?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
You've been a mentor to so many.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it much when it was going on. I mean, because there was always something more, and there were new people, and I never. Part of it was an organic process. It wasn't something I had set out to do, and it was all, happening for. The timing was amazing. So it was happening in other places, and so I could learn from other people what they were doing, and just those kind of connections were incredibly important. And so I didn't really focus. After about 20 years, we actually said, you know what? We originally thought really what we were doing was, caring for land and being part of a conservation organization, but really the most important thing is educating young people. But it really took years for that to really come through. And now when I hear from people, and still I get notes here and there, or I see, former apprentices, someone's been now farming on their own for 25 years or something like that. That's, wow, amazing. Really amazing.
Well, I remember so distinctly that in the beginning when Katie and I were talking about this place, one of the reasons about starting Amber Waves, one of the reasons we believed that we could do it is because you believed we could do it. And we kind of had blinders about anyone else's opinion. Said, well, Scott thinks we could do it, so we just will.
Well, I remember I certainly hope to be encouraging, but I do remember your father saying,
it's pretty nervous.
They don't know what they don't know. That's what but I didn't tell you that. I didn't tell you.
Yeah. Good thing. I know.
You just
you just
left it at that.
Yeah.
There is something to that, though. I think that when you're entering a new experience, or you want to bring something to life, or it's meant to be that way. It's you're not meant to know, and the experience is going to be what it is.
Yeah.
But we did have, I think, more gumption or more audacity, or courage, all of the things that it takes to say yes or start something or turn an idea into action. Those were all there. There were, of course, people who said, don't do it that way, or do it this way, or impart on it. But I think they don't know what they don't know is truly a gift in so many ways, that you then,
because you also don't know what the limitations are.
Yeah.
You don't know that if they're at that.
Yeah, in your case, I mean, an interesting thing was you didn't know each other until you began, so here you were after one season of farming together, saying, well, we want to keep at this. We're going to be a team. And
Yeah.
And also, again, there's the
later.
timing, because this land was available right at that moment. And
Yes.
Yeah.
It's when I'm interviewing new apprentices now, one of my questions that as soon as they are a little calmer on the phone and after they've relaxed a little bit, I like to say, well, if you were going to start your own operation, what might you like to do? And they're typically very shy about saying it out loud, because maybe they think that their dreams are ridiculous, but I'd love to pull it out of them. Like, well, what I might envision for myself is this, and I love hearing those ideas coming from young people about what they want to do.
Yeah.
So when you arrived, well, will you tell us a little bit about starting one of the first CSAs, or being part of one of the first CSAs in the country and in New York State?
Yeah. So when we came back we'd been in Cornwall for 8 years, and when we came back, my father-in-law, William King, a great American sculptor, married to my mother-in-law, Connie Fox, also great abstract painter. were members of the first CSA out here, and it would have been, and that was the beginning of the first in New York State. There was another CSA that formed at the same time upstate.
And those, for those to just remind everyone what CSA stands for.
Community supported agriculture.
Right.
Yeah.
And what year are we talking about? First CSA in the New York?
1986 was
Okay.
the year that the idea came across from Switzerland with this fellow. And he took the idea to a place called Indian Line Farm in western Massachusetts. And Robin Van En was the farmer there, and she said, so not only did she create a CSA farm, there was another one the same year, 1986, called Temple Wilton in New Hampshire. And so those were sort of sister farms. And then Robin took she became the ambassador. She took the idea around, and I saw her at a conference in Washington, D.C. That's how I right when I was just getting into it. And I too thought, wow, this is an amazing idea. Let's keep going with this. So Bill and Connie, my mother-in-law, were members of, there were 10 families that started this CSA in Bridgehampton. And with a guy named Hugh Williams had a biodynamic orchard there. So this is an important detail because all the first CSAs were on biodynamic farms. The guy who brought the idea over was, it was a biodynamic farm that he worked on as well. So so they were, members of that CSA. There were 10 families or something like that. He said, would you like to come to a meeting about this thing called CSA, which I didn't know anything about and nobody else did really. And it was right over there in Scoville Hall, right across the street from where we're sitting. And I said, oh, this is something I can get into. And it
what
was,
struck you about it? What was it?
I already knew that gardening was something I wanted to continue, but how do you make a living doing that?
Right. Yeah, that's
rather
right.
important.
That's the question.
Yeah, that's the question. And we had just landed in this country. It was not easy coming back after 8 years in this hillside above a little fishing village in Cornwall, and I was very much taken with that place. And so coming back here, well, this is an interesting thing. How do you find your feet? You plant your feet in the ground, right? And so this was a chance to actually work with the ground, with the soil. So it was that, but it was also the community aspect. So the idea of CSA was new, but recognizing that, oh, this has to do with growing food and working with the earth, but it also has to do with building community.
Will you just describe for anyone listening or watching who even though we say community supported agriculture might not be sure how they even work or what the general concept is? Well,
it's really the general concept is that the farmer is not on his or her own. The community agrees to back the farmers, so they join in a common effort, which is, growing food, taking good care of land, all that sort of thing. And from that point, there can be, who knows how many different models of CSA, but it has to do with the fact of a local community supporting the farmer, basically, right?
That you're entering the season, shared risk, shared reward, everyone's on the same team. And the participatory element of the community amongst themselves, but then also the relationship with the farmer and the eater develops in a different way.
Right. One of the first books, I think, about CSA was titled, It's Not Just About Vegetables. Right. So that's the community aspect, basically. Yeah.
Right.
Does that get it across to most people?
I think so.
Yes, I'm happy.
Definitely.
Well, there's so many different ways a CSA can be successful. I mean, probably not infinitely many models, but so many models of how they work now in our modern times.
And Quail Hill's model was it unique at the time, or how did you decide to have it? Why did you choose that model?
Well, so
and what is
yeah.
the model? I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Can you describe the model?
I didn't choose it. It was actually chosen by those first 10 families who like this idea of CSA, but they wanted to have their hands in the soil. They wanted to be actively involved, and so that's the model: is that people actually come into the fields and harvest their own food, and we were really unique, not only in that aspect, but in the aspect that we were part of a land trust, so that the overall umbrella organization was a conservation organization. We were the only ones, I mean, we probably talked about it when you were there, we were the only ones in the whole country doing that for maybe 15, 20 years, something like that. And I know that because I would get calls from people involved in land trusts and people involved with CSAs from different aspects and say, well, how do you do it? What's
Do you mean
what,
the only ones doing it that way and having the members actually harvest food for themselves
well,
in the fields?
more than that, we were the only combination or a marriage of a CSA and a conservation organization. So that's sort of the beginning. And then, yeah, we definitely were the only ones with people marching out into the field. And most farmers said, yikes, you let them do that?
Because you have to relinquish some sense of, you even more so than you already have to relinquish control to the
Right, it's
outside
adding
elements.
another variable.
Then you have,
And you have people
people.
who don't know the difference between a scallion and an eggplant.
I know, how humiliating. But I remember though being an apprentice at Quail Hill and having members come into the field and harvest, and you'd see the first half of a Swiss chard bed just really cut back so aggressively, and people, they're creatures of habit. They don't walk farther, and have no zucchini in the first half of a bed and then huge baseball bat zucchini in the second half, because people are just kind of staying at the fronts. And I remember that being a little stressful for us, because as farmers,
do you remember how stressful it was for Joe O'Grady?
Yes.
It drove him nuts, especially with the basil. That was like the worst thing, because people just cut it off at the ground and that was the end of it. But Joe took to doing signs, and there was one time where he kind of lost it, and we had signs showing people where to pick what
Some
vegetable and
instruction
everything.
about how to
how
properly harvest, for plant health.
Yeah, kindly stated. When I went there one day, Joe had put the signs up and it said, Achtung! Wake up!
Attention!
And I said, Joe, that's going a little far. Let's soften the language here.
There were some stories that we heard. I'm thinking of Eileen Roman, was one of the first CSA members that we met at Quail Hill.
Yeah.
And from her mouth, I remember her saying, digging my own potato changed my life.
Oh, wow.
And at the time when she was telling us this, I had not yet ever dug a potato. And I was like, what are you talking about? It changed your life? I'm about to plant potatoes, but I've never dug a potato either. And so I think to that point, the hands in the soil, or that deeper level of understanding of where your food's coming from or how a plant grows, that people can participate in many stages of growth, not just the eating part, but the harvesting part too, really does change people's life and perspective.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
How did in your you're a poet farmer, in that perhaps in that order. It's an intentional order that you say it that way.
Yeah, because people have asked and said which came first, right?
And how do you think that being a poet farmer, being an author, how do you think that doing those two things at the same time, how they informed each other in your years of farming and writing and speaking? And
I kind of struggled for many years to come up with an answer for that, because I have been asked that before, and I always tried to find a way that they do work together, but I tried to describe that, and I never really came up with an answer that satisfied me. And recently I read a book by a wonderful writer named Rebecca Solnit, and it's called Orwell's Roses. It's a beautiful book, and George Orwell's a great gardener, and he also was a great writer. And she talked about the difference between them. One being entirely solitary. A writer's life, you know, I mean, just to come up with one book, just to, you know, it's you at the table, and, you know, it's so solitary, whereas farming is quite different. I mean, even if you tried to get away from people, you couldn't, because you need a lot of help when you're farming, right? So they're really very, very different, and maybe there's an appeal in that actually, given the variety of life, of actually, you know, not, of actually experiencing more of the variety of life. So somehow they intertwine.
Well, I think one of the things that always felt like so special about having you as our mentor is that I think when Katie and I were so new to farming, and there are real pressures of production and challenges of the growing season, and the year that we were farming at Quail Hill was before much of the land was deer fenced, and it was when the deer pressure got really bad out here.
Oh, boy.
And so there's just, you know, some days that were just tremendously frustrating. But I think in, you know, as a worker, as an apprentice on that farm, I think you just pulled the beauty and the magic continuously every day from the fields, you know, beyond the sense of pace and operations and all the things that had to happen. I mean, such that I've had the pleasure of hearing you speak enough times that when anytime I'm reading something that you've written, it takes me a really long time to read because I read it in your voice. Which is like I read it in your speaking voice, because you're just able to, I think, capture the magic that it's going on around us that can be really easy to lose. It can be easy to lose sight of the magic. The magic is happening around us, but
thank you.
yeah, that's certainly what I thought.
Well, we have two of your books.
And
here,
actually,
but
Katie, will you tell us the story
about
of
this
how
common ground?
Yeah, I want you to talk about it too.
Okay. So,
will you hold it up?
oh yeah. So I don't know how many people feel this way in their life, that they read a book and it changes their life. But this book changed my life. So thank you. And this was gifted to me from a person that I hired to replace me at a job. And she said, "Oh, I hear you're interested in farming. Here you go."
Wow.
And I was going from New York to Washington, D.C., and I remember reading it in 3 nights.
Wow.
I know.
Amazing.
She didn't know about your speaking voice yet, so she didn't have to read it in your
Until
speaking
I got
voice.
on the phone with you for my interview several years later. And then I was like, wow. It reads like he sounds. This is the coolest.
You know that my mentor, poet mentor named Basil Bunting, you've heard that name a number of times, right?
Yes.
Said poetry must be read aloud. That was what I've carried with me since, you know, I was 20 years old, and Basil Bunting was my teacher. So, anyhow.
So I devoured this, and then it took a couple years of exploration of small-scale organic agriculture in Southern California before the timing was right for me to write you a letter and apply for the apprenticeship position. But I was revisiting some of your words today, and I just, there's something you said in here that about bringing what's happening in farming day to day, but like Amanda was saying, pulling the magic out of what's happening, but putting words to it. And the way that you do that is astounding and beautiful and lyrical and poetic.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm so grateful that you are a poet farmer. I remember going up to your office. I think I had been an apprentice for like 2 weeks, and I had seen you down by the chicken coop, and I was rolling up a hose, and you said, "So are you going to stay?" And I was like thinking to myself, are you going to stay? I just moved across the country and I'm working 12 hours a day and I'm loving it. Yeah, I'm going to stay. But now I get it. Not everyone stays.
Not everyone.
So I understand why you asked that.
Yeah. But also remember that we also said to you, because you were calling from California,
right?
And we said we always interview, so we always want to meet someone in person. Right. Until you came, we had never hired anyone who we hadn't met.
No, I don't think I ever knew that.
It was just on the phone.
Yeah, on the phone, but it was on the phone maybe at least 3 times, maybe even more. So finally, you know, because originally you said, well, it would be difficult, but maybe I could take a flight there. And then finally, after maybe 3 conversations, we said, just come. Just come.
Just do it. Just make the move. Yeah. So, and then Amanda picked me up from the train station, and
we went to Mary's Marvelous for a coffee. And it's one of those things where I pulled up and you had your big suitcases, and the Long Island Railroad was closed for service that day. So you said, I just got on a bus from Patchogue. And I said, it's Patchogue.
Well, learning the Long Island lingo is challenging.
And then we went and got a coffee and went got to Quail Hill, and you opened up your suitcase and you pulled out like work pants and shirt, went into the bathroom, changed your clothes.
You were ready to go.
And you were like, ready to go.
What are we doing today, folks?
I walked you down.
You know what we were doing?
We were pruning in the orchard.
Oh.
Yeah.
Pruning in the orchard. To meet those first few moments are, it's just so
Well, you were ready.
Ready.
I was
ready.
running. Just needed a coffee.
Into it.
So just needed a coffee. So one of the people ask us all the time, what's your favorite thing to grow? And I think I have a handful of favorite things to grow, but I think something that you shared your love of that has never, or that really struck us and is now part of the culture at Amber Waves, certainly, is garlic.
Here it is.
Ta-da!
Here it is. How can you not love such a thing?
How can you not love such a thing?
What do you love most about it?
I think I think the most is that, you know, most of what we grow on our kind of farms is our annual crops, and they're very fast. Think of something like radishes, which are ready to harvest in 25 days or something like that. But garlic is the only thing that you plant in the autumn, for one thing, right? So you plant it here around Halloween, and then it's in the ground for 8 months. So you actually, so I'm just talking about how much time you get to spend with this plant. And that's probably what I like most about it. But it's also delicious.
So delicious.
We have it every night, and it doesn't matter what it fits into, but we eat it daily, and it's also so adaptable. It's one of the only plants that can grow at sea level and at 14,000 feet, and I like that about it, the adaptability. It's also just when it's there for 8 months and you're watching the growth, first thing up in the spring, and then it does the type that we grow that forms the scape, this magical thing that, the first time I saw that, I thought, well, how could you not love this plant, right?
So spirited.
So spirited. Yeah, so lots of good things about it.
I think something that I love about growing it is that it has so many gifts for us over its life cycle. So it's the first thing up in the spring, which is exciting. We always plant the smaller cloves to be green garlic. So one of the first, so it goes into the first CSA boxes. So we harvest them looking like a leek, and it's so it's great to have green garlic season. And then after that, the scapes come out. And then after that, the, quote, real garlic.
Right. Right.
And those first few weeks of real garlic before it's cured, when it's fresh and
when
so
it's fresh
juicy.
And juicy.
And there's
wow.
you can't,
wow.
you could never find such a thing in a grocery store. No. Those juicy first garlics before the skin is papery thin like this, when the skin is thicker.
Right.
I think another thing about garlic it's so funny, there's hair in this one because this is largely a girl farm and there's kind of hair and everything. One of the other things that I love about it is that, to what you just said about, mostly having mostly growing annual vegetables. So we have cucumbers and tomatoes and lettuce, and because we're in a seasonal area, we can grow those things for a portion of the year. And then we have storage crops, squash and sweet potatoes that last for much of the year. But unless you're really good, you're substituting or supplementing or buying some vegetables in some of the off season. But it is reasonable for even a home gardener to grow all the garlic they need for the whole year.
Right.
And there's almost nothing else that you'd grow that you say, I'm growing all of it, all of my wheat, all of my potatoes,
everything that you would
all
need
of
to
my grapes.
eat in a year.
And that's something about it. And that's how my dad as a home gardener operates. He has all his garlic for the year. He grows himself. And that's such a special thing in the Northeast where we have kind of a long, cold winter. So I love that
And then
about
in
it.
addition to that, we were talking about this before we started filming, but the idea that you can save the seed.
It's the only seed that we
It's
save.
the only seed that we save at our farm right now. Yeah.
And for people, this is actually the perfect time for anyone who's watching or listening to know this, but the way that we grow garlic is by planting a clove around Halloween.
This is a bulb.
This is a bulb. So Katie loves to do things like, go ahead, open it.
I was like, God, am I going to get to be the one to open it? I had to wait 5 minutes while we were talking. I just wanted to unwrap this present so bad. Well, because sometimes there's some fun coloration and some peaches and
So we're planting
fuchsias and purples.
We're planting a single clove. Those are beautiful cloves. We're planting a single clove.
Which way do I plant it?
What a good question.
Really good question.
The pointy tip is up. The side that came from the root is down.
The root
It
needs
will
to
turn.
root.
We've all seen the ones that we've all seen the
It will turn.
the hairpin turn.
It just won't grow to the full size.
Exactly, because it has to spend so much of its energy turning around.
Yeah.
And so we plant. So actually, soon, any cold and rainy days will be spent with the farm crew sitting on chairs or upside down buckets in the greenhouses on rainy days, hand breaking apart the garlic into individual cloves so that we're ready to plant them out around Halloween. So we're planting them. Well, do I know this from you of planting any seed that you're planting it as deep as it is tall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, although I think actually we might go a little bit deeper with garlic than that.
Yeah, you can.
Yes.
Yeah. We found some heaved up sometimes on certain years with the first frost.
Yes.
So there's a point in planting it a little deeper, basically. Yeah.
Something you taught me is when I was a 22-year-old apprentice also is that people have a tendency to plant seeds too deep and plants too shallow.
Yeah.
And that is a thing that we always have that in mind with new apprentices about how really getting transplants deep into the ground and not even when we're seeding in the greenhouse, seeding in the seedling trays is not making the hole to the bottom.
Right.
This little seed has a long way to go.
Yeah.
So this is the time to be setting your garlic aside and to be.
So if you were shopping at a farmer's market, you found your farmer who had, this is a hardneck variety of garlic, and now we can maybe just name it, German amber. I'm saying it's a German.
It's a German white
varietal, but you could go to a farmer's market this time of year and buy large bulbs of garlic and bring them home and determine that each clove could be a seed in your own home garden. Or you can just ask your farmer, is this seed
could I plant
seed
this?
worthy?
Yeah. Right.
And they might say no, but I'll bring you some seed.
And the impressive thing about this variety is how large the cloves are. So this is a hard neck as well, right? And the soft neck varieties grown in California that made Gilroy, the supposed garlic capital of the world, do not put up a scape, and they also have, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 little tiny cloves, which is
mostly what people think of in their kitchen.
Right.
In your kitchen, you think of those little annoying cloves, but this hard.
This is like you can get your whole fist around.
Once you've cooked with a clove like this, it's hard to go back.
Probably
and for flavor.
In volume, 3 or 4 cloves to the one.
And they're gathered around this. I love a child on a field trip once called this the garlic bone one time. It really feels like that. But this is the hard neck or stiff neck. So they're 1, 2, 3. This one has 6. I think they're probably between 5 and 7 typically per head. So we're planting almost 20,000 heads a
Good
year.
for you.
And then when they're coming out of the ground, we're sorting by size. So the small ones we're typically replanting as green garlic. The medium ones go to CSA because they can get unlimited amount. The large ones we sell in our retail in our store because they have to be consistently sized, and then the largest ones we're setting aside for seed. So I would say on the table here, probably.
Did you
these
grow
two largest
garlic in
heads
Cornwall?
Are the ones
Or
we're gonna
was
do for
this
seed.
a New York
did.
CSA crop
no,
for
I
you?
did. I did try garlic in Cornwall. Yeah, because by that time, I mean, once you get hooked on gardening, you know, you're going to find things that you're going to really like this. And it wasn't the ideal place for growing it, so I certainly never had garlic this size. And it really wasn't until I came here that I grew a substantial amount of it. But in the first year, I think we grew 20 pounds or something like that, you know, and then the next year we would go up to 75 pounds, and then, you know, 200 pounds, and then whatever. I think the most, maybe like 600 pounds.
I think that's probably where we are right
Something
now,
like
around
that.
600.
Yeah.
But we now for the last few years we only are saving. We are only planting our own seed, and it's the only.
That's so great.
The only thing
That's
on the
really
farm
wonderful that you can
that's
do
like that. Well, and you know, I was telling the apprentices recently that the difference between being a seed production or a seed saving farm and a food crop farm is there's just vastly different, except for something like garlic that many growers save a lot of their own seed. Apart from garlic, what do you think are some of your other favorite things that you grow or have grown?
Well, I did get to be quite fond. I still am quite fond of tomatoes. I mean, in the beginning, I don't know. I probably because I'd never tasted, you know, tomatoes that taste like the kind that we grow now, right? And once I got into that, I certainly, and you know, so many different varieties. However, why wouldn't I mention potatoes right away?
Yes, of course.
Right. 1 year, a member just sort of very shyly came up, like afraid to ask me this question, and said, just why do you grow so many potatoes? And I
Potatoes?
said, yeah, potatoes. And I said, well, my mother is Irish, so why not? So yeah, I've loved that.
And historically, Long Island is known for, especially
here.
where we are here, for growing potatoes. But we were growing potatoes at Quail Hill that, I mean, the biodiversity in the potato crop was, I mean, 20 or 30 different varieties of rainbow of colors.
Yeah.
I mean, these purples and pinks and oranges. I mean,
reds,
I had just never experienced.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that we did when we arrived as new apprentices, and really I think of the time of Katie and me getting to know each other when we first got to the farm, was cutting apart the seed potatoes to plant them. Was sitting in the driveway on an upside down green bin and cutting potatoes apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we don't grow potatoes. We
Right.
let our neighboring farmers grow potatoes,
Right,
but
I
really
feel
truly because of that
I may be
pesky beetle.
slightly I'm not to blame for that, but it may be the Colorado potato beetles that we had to deal with when you were there, and I don't remember if that was a particularly difficult year.
It was
or not.
it was
So
particularly
that would
really-
discourage many people from growing potatoes.
Well, I think knowing that we just didn't have, I mean, I guess we just could have done a few beds and dug them by hand, but there was something about it. I think we were thinking, well, we can't afford a potato digger, or I don't know, there's something about it that made us feel like we couldn't do it. And then the thing is, our neighbors, everyone around us is so good at growing potatoes.
Yeah, right.
And so it's one of the things, a handful of times a year we buy them in even for our CSA, just so that they can have the special, you know, the specialness of it.
Yeah. Well, you right away, your interest was really focused on grains, right? So that's a whole
other
thing in itself, really. So, you know, maybe you went in that direction.
Potatoes would be easier than grains.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Well, we were trying to do something that hadn't been done in a while in agriculture.
We're trying to to figure out what our niche would be, how we could differentiate ourselves and you know be part of the farm web in Amagansett and do something slightly different. So Quail Hill, of course, already existed, and balsam farms already existed, and we were thinking, how will we be different? Or you know, What's been fun in the last few years is that we're just not the new kids on the block anymore. 17 years in, there are many newer farms that have come after us. Some of those farms have been started by our own apprentices, and that's been such an exciting thing to watch.
Now we have some generations.
I know,
so
yeah.
my apprentices and your apprentices, yeah.
It's
amazing.
It's a really fun.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Can we talk about why that's important though, training new farmers, and why CSA farms are important, especially like at this time right now, the state of agriculture? I mean, you've seen a whole career of change in agriculture, and you were part of the very initial movements on certified organic, but what is the state of agriculture, in your opinion? What's the state of agriculture right now, and why is it important to talk about and educate young people?
Yeah, because we need more farmers, right? I
we
mean,
sure do.
You know, before the Second World War, half of the population, 50% of the population, farmed or lived on farms, and that's not that long ago, right? 70 years ago, and now it's 1.5% or something of U.S. workers are actually farmers. That's a lot, not enough people. So, the fascinating thing is that how many, young farmers, and you can tell me about the people who apply for apprenticeships with you, come from the suburbs, and have looking for some form of work that actually has a purpose that can be. You can't even describe how enriching it can be, basically, in all kinds of ways for mind and body. So that's the main reason why we want to keep it going, basically. And it's to me, it's certainly been proven that the industrial style of agriculture has not done well. At least in relation to taking care of the soil and such a long road to go down, and it's not the only road. So let's work on another way. That's really been my philosophy all along, basically, without trying to hammer at people who are sort of been brought up in the industrial style of agriculture. I've never faulted any farmers at all. Why would you do that? But there are other ways that are beneficial to the soil and the health of the environment and the local communities, basically.
Right, and there are so many challenges just embedded in agriculture, and you raise chickens for a few years and then you realize, oh, this is why they put chickens in cages, because everything is trying to kill them.
Yeah.
And you have a crop die from a disease or a pest that comes through, and you say, this is why people spray. And so when you're doing it, you realize that why we've gotten the way that we've gotten in the industrial complex, and the margins on food are just so slim. There's so much downward pressure on food prices in this country that people think differently about food prices than other prices. If you walk into a store and there's an expensive sweater and you don't want it, you just don't get it. But the way that people react at a farmer's market, if they think a tomato is too expensive, they will tell you that it is too expensive. No one's walking up to the store clerk and saying, this sweater is outrageous. They're just moving on. But people feel differently about food. They feel like it should be cheap. And so it's kind of, as growers, it's this fine line where the food that we grow can be expensive because it's high quality, because of paying workers, because of taking care of your soils, because of internalizing what might otherwise be an externality of an abuse of an animal or of a person or of soils or of another sort of resources. And so that just isn't cheap. It's just not cheap.
Nor should it be.
Right, and which is not to say that everybody doesn't deserve access to it. So I think that's really the question that we have to answer, is how to provide everybody with access to high quality food, knowing that it isn't cheap to produce. That those two things are both true.
Yeah.
How do we do
it needs
that?
more people. We're back to that again, right?
We are back to that.
It actually needs more people, and then the cost isn't the major factor in that way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will you tell us what you're writing right now?
Oh, thank you. Nice of you to ask.
So I can read it very slowly in the future.
So I could devour it because I need a new book to read. Well, maybe it's not a book.
I put it at the end of.
Maybe it's a screenplay.
At the end of one of these books, Seed Time, I think I wrote.
We have Seed Time here.
In my acknowledgments that my sister she's a great fan of these books, and she'd read it in like 5 days. Well, you said you read it in 3 nights or something like that. I said, it takes me, 8 years to write it. You can read it in 5 days.
Slow down.
Yeah, so I'm really, so I've been going around the last 2 years since the latest book, Soil and Spirit, came out, and it's interesting that it's nice that I had an editor at Viking for This Common Ground, and he said about that book, he said, I thought this book had legs. That's the way he put it. Like it's out there, and it's got some legs. And that seems to be the case with Soil and Spirit, so I'm still traveling around with that. But I'm going back to something I started writing about my father-in-law, the sculptor, William King. And I actually have a thicker notebook. I've got a pile of things that's the book. I just have to somehow transfer it onto the page. That I was working on before Soil and Spirit, and I'm trying to go back to that now. But there are so many good books to read. I keep spending a lot of time reading. And I have this amazing. My mornings now are I get to read. I don't have to get up and go anywhere, and so what a pleasure. So I just turned into a voracious reader, and hopefully another book is on its way.
Okay, so then on that note, what are you growing right now?
Oh, so did we? Yeah, we must have had the Chinese herb thing going on when you were there. But what do you remember about it?
I remember it.
I was trying to tell the difference between an eggplant and an onion. So
I remember nobody was in charge of it, but we knew
yeah.
at the time the history of it was that I think the project was about 5 years old.
Uh-huh. That's about right. Yeah, 2003.
And there had been
so exactly that
plantings, and it was there, but it wasn't. You took us into the garden. You introduced us to it, but that
then we
kind
had
of
to grow.
there. Then we had to grow
tomatoes. A lot of vegetables.
We had to grow tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now I get to focus on this. So it's, and it's neat that it's been there since 2003, and I just didn't have time to focus on it. And it was introduced to us by a woman named Jean Giblette, and she has a garden called High Falls Garden in the Hudson Valley. And the idea came when she realized that there were 20,000 practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, in this country, and they were ordering everything that they ordered from China. And there's no reason for that, because it's actually, most of these herbs are not difficult to grow. Mm-hmm. And so she got some grant money, and she asked a number of farms throughout New York State to be involved in this project of, experimenting. And I raised my hand right away, and she wanted us involved because we're in Zone 7. Mm-hmm. And if people don't know what that means, it just means that we have long growing days. The calendar of Zone 7 starts in Texas and weaves up through, and Long Island is actually the last of that. So anyhow, now I'm sort of focused on, I have a little, whatever it is, half an acre garden, which is plenty. And have about 35 different species of these Chinese herbs, learning a lot about them. I get to actually focus on the plants, mm-hmm. When you're growing annuals, and in go the radishes and out come the radishes,
mm-hmm.
and
and then in goes the spinach, and then we just keep going.
Yeah, you keep going. And so it's a real privilege to actually have the time to actually focus on these plants. And she has actually started now distributing them. Most of what the plants I'm growing, the medicinal part is the root. So she comes down and we dig some roots. She takes them back, and she has now 20 farms, I think, in New York, who are growing and experimenting with different species. And then she now markets them to practitioners of TCM through something called Zhejiang herbs, and Zhejiang is regeneration. Yeah, word that's come to be the word to use, right? Regenerative farming.
Let's talk about it for a minute.
Yeah.
What do you, it is the word du jour.
It's the word
it's
now,
really,
isn't it?
Yeah. What do you think about it? What do you think about that word, regenerative?
Well, I like the word, actually. I like, I mean, what could be, life going on, right? And generative. It's a lovely word. And as far as using that word as being the descriptive now, I mean, I don't think it's much different than how we used organic, and then for a while it was sustainable, and that's a little fuzzy for many people, and regenerative has a nice ring to it, to me, yeah.
And then
so
it's
we'll
now
see.
regenerative organic. They're now
right.
kind of in lockstep, which
Yeah.
maybe even creates a more robust description of what this is.
Yeah.
Which is hard to put into words, really.
It is, although I think here it is, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I often do that when people would ask me about individual words. Hopefully we'd be out in the field and I'd say, oh, here it is, right here, right? Yeah. Ultimately having to do with the quality of the soil. So that's really I hope I
soil microbial life.
I mean, we must have done quite a bit of talking about that, I think.
Soils.
We did,
yes.
right in the beginning. And you can never forget the moment when someone teaches you, and you taught us, that in a teaspoon of soil, there are billions of microorganisms in a healthy teaspoon of soil. Wow.
Yeah.
We're in charge of a lot.
Yeah.
Many in charge
billions.
of so many animals, yeah. I have, well, we could ask you questions all day, but I have one more question, which is about, will you tell us the story of the Shinnecock bean?
Oh,
Would you just remind us of that story?
Yeah, that's such a lovely story. And funny, I just got an email from Ariel, who's the farmer at Sylvester Manor's sister farm here, and I had given her some Shinnecock beans, and she wrote this really beautiful email about now the second year of growing them, the wonderful harvest they had, etc. So the reason I encountered the Shinnecock bean was at a NOFA, Northeast Organic Farming Association, winter conference, which we attended together a number of times, right? And there's a woman who's known for growing seed varieties and keeping. She actually in her supply of seeds, she has 1,000 varieties of beans.
Of beans? Just 1,000 varieties of beans.
She's a bean bank.
She's a bean bank. She is.
TM.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
Lisa Bludnick.
Lisa.
Yeah. And so she, every year at that conference, would put out, somewhat of a supply of the beans she had. And I was, looking at them, and there was this beautiful cranberry-colored one. And I said, what is this one? And she said, it's the Shinnecock bean. I said, well, I know the Shinnecocks. My children went to school with Shinnecocks, and I have friends on the reservation. And can I have some? And she said, well, of course. So I don't know, maybe I had 10 or 15 beans or something like that. And this was right, then COVID came along. And so the first year I planted them out, but then I got, a nice supply of them. And I called Shane at the reservation, Shane Weeks, and said...
And of course, and you can save bean seeds, because a bean is also a seed.
A bean is a seed, yeah. So I actually was growing them for saving the seed.
For saving the seed.
I wasn't eating the
so you were trying to,
string bean.
Right. So you were trying to grow out the population.
Trying to grow it out,
right.
And so I had a nice little supply, and I called Shane Weeks, and I told him this part of the story, and he said, is it cranberry colored? It was so neat that he had that association. He said, I've always heard about it, but I've never seen it.
Like it's been lost.
It had been lost. Well, so I called Lisa to find out about the provenance, right? And Lisa had gotten it from a seed grower in Kentucky who was the third generation, and his grandfather had gotten the Shinnecock bean from a fisherman from Long Island. And
Story checks out.
yeah, and then Lisa, then she got it from him, and she grew out in Binghamton, New York, and I grew it out here, and gave some to Shane, and he was very moved. He said it hasn't been on our land for 100 years. Isn't that amazing?
Extraordinary.
Yeah, and think of that one. It's such a wonderful story, but just talk about hopeful stories. I mean, think of that happening all around the world.
Well,
of seeds being saved and passed
and
on.
passed. And retaining their name.
The story of the seed.
Knew
but
about
had
the
never
seed, right?
Seen it.
He knew it. He
or
knew.
eaten it. He knew of
He
it.
knew of the bean, and he knew it was a special bean, and it was their bean.
And
right?
that people
Yeah.
cared for it enough to maintain the
To
name,
keep it
even if the
going.
name was unfamiliar to them.
Yeah.
And that you happened to, of all the seeds on the table, that you happened to ask about that one.
That one.
Yeah, you
bean.
could have walked right on by and
Yeah.
never even have known it.
So now, this is that's a good story in itself, but now when I, have given talks, so there's a chapter in Soil and Spirit with, about the Shinnecock bean, and I often have read that when I've gone around giving readings and everything, and at the end I say, if anyone is interested in Shinnecock beans, I'll send them to you. And so now they're all over the place there. And a couple of years ago I gave a reading in Huntington, Long Island, mid Long Island, and a woman came up. She had been to a reading I gave a year before. She's a gardener, and asked for some beans. I sent her some Shinnecock beans, and she brought them. A year later,
Back
she said,
to you.
"Here they are." And she's growing them out. She's going to keep growing them out.
Plant people are the best.
I agree.
We're so weird, but it's really,
But isn't it so nice to be connected by something from the natural world, to say, I'm going to share that with you. You go have your experience with it, but then you can come back and then share that experience with it. And I think especially, I'm finding this in this digital age and revolution, I think it's really important to have the human connection, the natural connection, the plant connection, and to share that.
Yeah, yeah, that's lovely.
Which I do think is what community-supported agriculture.
Yeah, yeah.
The underpinnings are there for that.
Right.
It's the point of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's lovely.
well, Scott, boy, we could just talk to you all day.
We don't get to do this. very
We
much,
don't,
so.
and not as much as we
Yeah.
we would like, but
Maybe this is the first episode.
yes, the first of an entire other series. It's such a pleasure to have you, on this farm, and I hope that you know and hold within you that we truly could not have done this without you and without your just supreme belief that we could do this, and for helping us throughout all of the years, from tractor work to advice to support and shared meals, and we just have.
And your poet farmerisms that stay with us, that we pass on, that are such gifts.
Thank you.
Thank you.